The way that we should approach color is to be very mindful. Before we just started adding color randomly into a piece, we need to ask ourselves what are the objectives of doing that. Having the objectives sort of help us make decisions along the way rather than just blindly trying things out. Usually for me, there are three main objectives when I use color. The first one is trying to think about what type of feeling I'm trying to convey. The second one is seeing how I can use colors to move the eyes around to tell the story that way. And the third one is just really bringing the world of the art alive with the colors. So talking about how colors really bring things alive, I recently watched a documentary made by Peter Jackson. So he used old black and white World War I footages, but remastered them with colors. First part of the movie before Britain go into war and the soldier landed on the continent were in black and white. And once we got into the trenches, all of a sudden everything come into color. And that contrast was pretty powerful. We always see the black and white as, ancient history, but all of a sudden now all the people feel so much more real. And then you can see the flash of the color, the rouge on their cheek, and all of a sudden you realize how young those soldiers were and really hit you that pretty much we're sending a bunch of kids to war. And I felt like that was very emotional for me watching. Now let's use another example of my own work. This one was for a book called Kama Sutra. Some of you might be familiar with that. It's about essentially love and also sex. Very different from World War I subject matter, obviously. In this scene, we see a little bit of a afternoon delight of a couple, sneaking a snuggle in a archway. As you can see in the color piece, the warmth of the red and the yellow really bring out the moment of the time and the temperature and the romance because of that. And now we turn that into black and white. All of a sudden, we're losing all of that mood, and also the different elements become a little bit harder to read. So there's a few common pitfalls when it comes to using color. Usually it's just going to extremes, like being too bold. So you're using all the colors that you possibly can and using all of them to the extreme when it comes to saturation. Or you're being just too timid, very much staying in the mid-range of the value of the hue. So everything is lacking a clarity or hierarchy. So I always find it really interesting how our senses and our cognition kind of work together. I read this really interesting article about how someone analyzed Homer's Odyssey and how in the whole book, they describe all kinds of color, but one color was lacking in particular, which was blue. And the way they were describing sea was using deep wine color. And someone was making the assumption that because of that, we actually couldn't really see blue for the longest time, at least for, ancient Western civilization. And that got me thinking, like language in some way, now we have all these different words for different colors. It really helped us see those colors separately and more distinctly. But it also takes color out of their context. So we think of color as red, as yellow, as green, as blue, and we see them packaged also in different tube of paint. That's all separated. But if you really think about it, color never exists in isolation. If you look around in your surrounding, there's no just red standing out. It's always within its own context. So color is more of this shifting fabric of hues and values. And sometimes it's easy to forget that, and that becomes a challenge when applying colors. And nowadays with the digital tool, it further disrupts that relationship because in the old days, when you're mixing color with paint, you're physically combining the pigments to create new colors. So if you start with 5 tubes of paint and then you create 20 colors, all those 20 colors have the same sort of parents that they were created from. So they have an inherent harmony that's built in. But whereas now you can just use your color picker and pick any colors you want from, Photoshop. And it's very easy to end up with something that looks like a vomit of rainbow that just, looks jarring. There's also this sort of prevailing misconception when it comes to color, and I feel like that also has something to do with our language and our vocabulary. For example, when we think of something that's bright, we think of, adding white. If we think of something dark, we think of adding black. But that actually creates very lifeless color palette, because everything in our surrounding is actually mixed with multiple colors rather than just simply adding black or white. The same as people thinking, if I want to make an image look really brilliant, then I have to use saturated color. It seems to make sense in our mind, the logic, but I'm going to show you some pieces that is going to